For just over a year now, the global health situation has wreaked havoc on the world, with the term quarantine being used in just about every country we know of. And with all this time spent cooped up in our apartments, what we want more than anything else is to get away from it all by traveling to distant and exotic places. But when the restrictions are finally lifted and it's safe to travel once more, where should we decide to go? Before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything we post. Well, whether you're a fan of Venice or just want to do the appropriate amount of research before choosing your final destination, you've come to the right place, as we're about to make an argument for why the capital of northern Italy is a definite must if you have the option. So jump aboard your gondolas, ladies and gentlemen, as things are about to get interesting. A little bit about Venice. Unlike any other city in Italy, Venice actually lies on around 117 small islands which have been connected by a series of bridges and separated by a number of canals. With a population of around 250,000 people, the capital of the Veneto region of northern Italy is also far from the largest in the geographical area. Regardless of its smallish size, however, the immense beauty and historical significance of the city play a huge role in making the destination one of the most visited tourist spots throughout the country. As for these historical implications, Venice actually played a rather large role for Italy during the Middle Ages, where it served as a stronghold and major financial military center. Due to the onset of the Renaissance period, the small city also saw an immense amount of cultural and artistic development, becoming known as the place to be for artists and sculptors alike. Like before, Venice is still an important economic center because of the sheer number of tourists it brings in. And if you're thinking why the small city is so beloved by tourists, you're about to see why, so don't go anywhere. St. Mark's Basilica. By far the most renowned building in Venice, Italy, St. Mark's Basilica is an incredible piece of architecture that you have to see in person to actually comprehend. Suffice it to say, photographs just don't do this amazing landmark justice. Surprisingly enough, this piece of architectural genius has stood the test of time since it was built back in 1092 and still serves as one of the most important buildings in northern Italy for religious reasons. With its courtyard often filled to the brim with pigeons that tourists love to feed and its many spires reaching straight up into the sky, this is one church you won't want to miss out on. And that's just the outside. Inside, you'll find ornate sculptures and brilliant examples of Byzantine artworks painted on the underside of its domed ceilings. It's a location you can honestly spend the day at without even fully encapsulating its unique beauty. Since it's located in the Piazza San Marco, and this is easily accessible from the Grand Canal, you really have no excuse to not see St. Mark's Basilica, regardless of how much you care for religious symbols. St. Mark's Square. As you can already tell, St. Mark was a pretty important guy in the history of Venice and Italy in general, which is why it's not just the basilica that was named after him, but the square surrounding the religious building as well. Inheriting the name of the most famous piazza in all of Italy, St. Mark's Square is the place to be if you want to get your hands on an incredible picture for Instagram. Located on the Grand Canal opposite the island of San Giorgio Maggiore, the square is surrounded by a series of historical buildings with everything from arched walkways to towering clocks. You'd also be wrong if you thought St. Mark's Basilica was the only building of historical importance on the square, as you'll also find St. Mark's Campanile, Doge's Palace, and Torre dell'Orologio in the surrounding area, making for an incredible panoramic shot. Who wouldn't choose this option? It allows you to not only take in some of the best sights in Italy with just one visit, but also feels like you're on the set of a famous spy movie. The Canal Grande. Like we mentioned earlier, Venice has a number of canals that connects its various islands to one another, which is why tourists can take the opportunity to rent out a gondola for the day and explore these many waterways with their own personal gondola ride. Probably the most famous of these canals is the Canal Grande, which loosely translates to Grand Canal. And as the name suggests, this is by far the largest of any of the canals you'll find throughout the watery streets of Venice. In fact, some would say it's more like a river than anything else. The Canal Grande passes from one side of Venice to the other while snaking through the central region of the city in an S-like pattern. You'll find a grand total of 4 bridges spread across the canal, along with over 170 buildings which date back to as early as the 13th century, showing just how important the transportation route has been over the history of Venice. There's no better way to take in the city sights than from the seat of a gondola in the Canal Grande, so make sure your camera is charged and ready to go. The Ponte di Rialto. Speaking of bridges that span the Canal Grande, there's one that's remembered over and above all others because of its impressive and unique look. We're of course talking about the Ponte di Rialto, which connects the districts of San Marco and San Polo to one another. And although this bridge is important to all of Venice to be able to move comfortably between the districts as mentioned, tourists can't help but stop and stare at its iconic beauty. Surprisingly enough, the Ponte di Rialto was originally a wooden bridge that stood for hundreds of years before its collapse in 1524, after which it was built up again as an ornate stone bridge. This means that the Ponte di Rialto, along with its immaculate detail and symmetrically perfect design, has been standing in Venice for just under 500 years. You'll also find a number of vendors set up on the bridge who sell everything from souvenirs to jewelry, so make sure to take your wallet along for some authentic Italian shopping. The Gallery dell'Accademia. If museums are more your thing, then make sure to stop off at the Gallery dell'Accademia, which is located just opposite the Ponte dell'Accademia. Built originally as a convent, the gallery was then converted into a museum in the mid to late 1700s and now houses one of the greatest collections of 19th century art. Featuring works by artists such as Bellini, Canaletto, and of course Titian, you won't know where to look first. Probably the most well-known piece that can be found in the Gallery dell'Accademia is Leonardo da Vinci's very own Vitruvian Man, which is known extensively throughout the artistic community as conveying the ideal proportions of man. You'll also be able to find the Resurrection of Tintoretto, Virgin and the Child by Titian, and the Battle of Lepanto by Veronese, with just one walkthrough. So what are you waiting for? Venice Lido. Taking in these incredible sights can become quite tiring though, so if you're looking for a spot of relaxation and bliss, Lido is the perfect place to be. To those of you who don't know, Venice Lido is a separate island which creates an almost barrier between the cityscape and the Adriatic Sea. Consisting of a long stretch of beach with ultra-fine sand to rest your weary back on, there's no better place to rest and become invigorated enough to explore what's left of the city. Home to only around 20,000 inhabitants, the Lido also comes complete with a number of residential areas, shops, restaurants, and hotels, each of which have a different vibe from the hustle and bustle of Venice itself. This stark contrast and mindset is a must-feel, and after spending more than a few days exploring the historical, the towering landscapes of the inner city will be an absolute treat to anyone who stumbles upon the area. Doge's Palace. Returning to the city, you'll want to take a look at one of the most renowned buildings in Venice, which just so happens to sit in St. Mark's Square overlooking the Canal Grande. We're of course talking about Doge's Palace, which has an unmistakable frontal facade which features arched designs made of white stone and a series of diamond patterns spread across its walls. The inside of the palace is just as impressive though, with a number of decorated rooms with original details, furniture, and artwork accompanying them. Tours of the palace are both available and encouraged if you want to know everything there is to know about the historical features of the building. But either way, you'll find yourself marveling at the incredible architecture, and before long you'll feel like you've traveled back in time to a place where the Renaissance is still alive. The Bridge of Sighs. Although much smaller than the other landmarks on this list, the Bridge of Sighs is one of the most viewed structures in Venice because of the incredible folktale that surrounds it. Passing over the Rio de Palazzo and connecting the Prigioni Nuove to Doge's Palace, this bridge can be found just off St. Mark's Square and is an absolute must-see when it comes to Venetian architecture. According to legend, criminals were often taken from the palace to the Bridge of Sighs, where they would be given the opportunity to take one last look at Venice before facing their punishment. Considering what awaited them in the future, it's no wonder these prisoners would stand there sighing, giving the bridge its now well-known name. San Marco Campanile. By far the tallest building in all of Venice, the San Marco Campanile stands 98.6 meters from the ground and is actually a reconstruction of the original landmark, which collapsed back in 1902. When originally created in the 9th century, the San Marco Campanile was used as a watchtower to ensure that Venice was kept safe from any attacking forces, which is why it exceeded any other surrounded building in height. Ever since its reconstruction, the tower's been damaged by everything from fires to earthquakes, and in some cases even lightning, but remains standing to this day as a show of the strength of Venice. And although the shaft of the building is simply made of towering red brick, it's the bell tower that makes tourists look up in wonder at the myriad of arches and stonework. You can even see a golden statue of the angel Gabriel looking down at the inhabitants of the city, watching them as they go about their business under his protection. And if you're truly brave, feel free to take the internal elevator up to the top of the building for a truly mesmerizing view of Venice. So will you be visiting anytime soon? Let us know in the comments section down below.